Hello. It's very nice to see you all in this fantastic, beautiful, white, virgin landscape of Kharkiv. I'm happy to be here in the Ukraine. We say the Ukraine, but that's wrong. It's Ukraine. I know that. I'm going to give you a presentation about, you could say my life so far, about what I've learned in the last 40 years. And of course, I hope you like it. The presentation will be on my research, as was said, but I have to tell you, I'm not a professor. I'm also not, I don't own a research institute. The company that I own is me, myself, and I. No one else. So what I'm going to tell you is what I learned during the last 40 years and what I think we can do with that. And the first slide is here, the farm, the suburb, and the city. The farm, this is where I was born. 1955 in the Netherlands, in a small village 10 kilometers from Eindhoven. My parents had a farm. They were, I have 7 brothers and 1 sister. And we live on this small farm, 3 hectares of land. And my father told me one thing. As soon as I could understand what he meant, he told me one thing. He said, I never had the opportunity to get education. In my family, there was a lottery. My brother and my sister had the opportunity to have an education, and the rest of the brothers, they had to do a farm because there was no more money, no other choice. And he told me, if you go to school, finish your school, I will do everything I can for all my children to have the education they want. So I went to school, and I went to another school, and another school, and another school, and I went to the university, and I went to live in Amsterdam. They were not happy with me moving from Eindhoven to Amsterdam, but they were very proud that I went to the university. And when I arrived in Amsterdam, I was looking for a room to stay, and I was hitchhiking, and I had a car bringing me to this area called Amsterdam Southeast, Bijlmermeer. And that is the wet dream, the result of the wet dream of the modernist architects. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that wet dream and their work that they did. Also in this city you have an area, 300,000 people living there with buildings like this. I lived there in this Bijlmermeer for 15 years. I was a student there, I worked there, and then in 1990 I had the opportunity to move to the city. Because we didn't consider this suburb the city. The city for us was Amsterdam, the historic city, that was the city, with all the services, everything around us. I moved there and I had the opportunity to do a project. And the project was about making new life in a derelict factory, a gas factory. I'm going to explain a little bit about that factory and the work that I did there, because another 15 years I worked on that gas factory project. But that project there in the city, already with the Bijlmermeer, I went to international conferences. I went to Budapest to meet people who were working in these kind of high-rise problem areas and how they solve them. I met the people from Pruitt-Igoe. You know Pruitt-Igoe, that's the area in St. Louis in America, the first high-rise modernist area that was demolished. We all know these pictures. I met those people who lived there and they told me their stories. When I worked at Westergasfabriek, I had the opportunity to meet plenty of international project managers and people all working on this kind of projects. And I started to think, hey, what do we have in common? What's going on here? What is needed to make a project successful? And I'm going to talk about that, the answer to that question that I started to ask myself. What is needed to make a project successful, what is needed to make such a project with a huge investment attractive, how can such a project survive, because the answer to that question is the same. Oh, it just needs, it's just me not touching.
Yes.
That's all. It will come. The thing thinks I talk too long. There's a warning for me. Hey, you have to move up. So I will talk about that. And why did I make this presentation? After, okay, 2005, I finished my work at Westergasfabriek. It's now 2018. So for 13 years, I have my own company. I work in all these kind of different projects. I will mention a little bit about that. There's a project in Morocco, there's a project in Brazil, there are different projects. But for the last 6 years, I worked a lot in Russia, in Moscow, in Petersburg, on different projects. And basically speaking, these situations are everywhere the same. And it's always the same thing. In every country, in every city, in every project, they think that they are unique. But they are not unique at all. At least not in my vision, not in my world view. Because everybody conquers with the same problems. And everybody is looking for the same solutions. And I'm only wondering why not more people are working on those answers. Why not more project managers, people who work in this kind of field, sit together and work together to find an answer to those very important questions. Now I had the opportunity in the last year, after working in Russia for 5 years, I was asked by Skolkovo University, that is a big, they think they are big, it's rather small, university on the outskirts of Moscow. It's a research institute. They want to have MIT there, but it's not really an MIT. It's much smaller. But nevertheless, they are founded by the government, and so the government gives them things to do. That's logical. And one of the things they had to do was teach bureaucrats and mayors from smaller cities all over Russia to make plans. Because all these guys and all these women working in those smaller cities, they write letters to the government, hey guys, we need money. Because we are going down, we can no longer swim. Because our cities are losing our talented young people, and what are we going to do? We need money, we need a new airport, we need a new railway station, we need a new road, we need new infrastructure, we need whatever we need, give us money. And we all know the oil price is down, the gas price is down, so there is no money in Russia. And so for a lot of years they could just send money and keep people happy. But the last 4 or 5 years that's rather difficult. So now they come up with a bright idea. They tell those guys, okay, we want to give you money, but before we give you money you have to make a good plan. And before they can make a good plan, they have to listen to me. Because I was part of the lecture that they all had to have to make that plan. So I talked to all these guys, 7 different lectures with 200 people in the room like you, but then old people from the regions in Russia not so very interested in the first steps to listen to me. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, had a lot of vodka the last night. So they are looking at me like, hey, what are you doing here? And I gave them this presentation. And after 3 hours, they all loved me. So we will see what happens to you. I told them this. I've been working in these projects, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I saw in these projects, hardware and software. Then I describe to you the success factors and some other issues, and we discuss what's going on in the world, and maybe then we have a clearer idea about what we are going to do in our cities, in our projects. And of course, that is also very important for you. Okay, Bijlmermeer. That was my first project. You know how this whole thing started. There were a lot of architects, they worked together in the 1930s of the last century. They were big fans of what was happening in Russia because they saw the revolution as a possibility to change the world. So they had big meetings, Le Corbusier, Rietveld, Markstam, all these big names of the 20th century. They met each other, they were all in the same field, and they had big meetings, and they planned to have a meeting in Moscow, 1930. But Stalin didn't like the idea of the palace for the people, designed by Le Corbusier, and they were so disappointed that they decided to sit on a boat going from Barcelona to Athens, and that was the beginning of the idea of the modern city. The results of this meeting were written down, and now it's very important to understand one thing. Le Corbusier was the guy who gave the inspiration, but the chairman of the meeting was a Dutchman called Van Eesteren. And Van Eesteren was also the head of city planning in Amsterdam. So Van Eesteren was the guy who brought all the information together. He decided to make a book of it. He decided to make papers about it. He decided to bring it to Switzerland, to America, to all these guys. Le Corbusier stole the idea, wrote a book in the Second World War called La Ville Radieuse, but generally speaking, that was only one of the results of this meeting. And this Van Eesteren, when he had the chance, directly after the Second World War, to use all these bright ideas that they had formulated on the ship, he said to his mayor in Amsterdam, you know, we have this beautiful canal area, we have this beautiful plan south, but now it is really time to create the city of the future. And that is going to be Bijlmermeer. And we have an empty polder, a piece of empty land. We are going to fill that with sand, and we are going to build the city of the future. And oh, they all like that idea. So he had a guy coming from Indonesia, his student assistant at the university, and he gave him the job, design that city. And I arrived there in 1975, and I lived there on the 9th floor. And I studied geology. And I asked myself, I was not an architect, not a city planner, nothing at all. I asked myself, which idiot came up with the idea to build something stupid like this? It's unbelievable. It was the most unsafe place on earth. There were no services. So I started to look in the books. I started to read Rem Koolhaas. I started to read about Siam. I started to read about all those things. And I thought, wow, this is something. I'm in the middle of really, this is something. So I studied and I studied and I finished my study and I wrote a lot of articles about this and I talked with a lot of people about it. I was also a leftist, so I was a community activist. I fought with people for better services, for better this, for better that. And when I finished my study and I wasn't able to find a job immediately, the commissioner of Amsterdam asked me to work for him. And he said to me, we give you money with a team, and you are going to make plans to make this city livable. Because we have 25% of the apartments empty. Unbelievable, 25%. So there is shortage of housing in Amsterdam, but 25% of the apartments were still empty. We have 30% movement of people. Every year, 30% of the population of this area moves. So we really have to do something. So I started to do things. And to make clear what I didn't do architecture, I didn't do city planning, I started to do program. Because my first idea was, it's not important what is there, it's important what happens there. And the problem with an area like this is that every human activity is put into a separate area. And that there is no connection between these activities, and that we should organize events, do small things to bring these things together. So silly things that I did were community gardens. I put community gardens in those green areas between the buildings, so people that were usually never meeting each other, met each other growing tomatoes. We did a market, we did events. We turned parking garages into discos. We organized football events. We did a lot of marketing, and that was what I did. Okay. We even built. So here you see what we did. But then a plane crashed. An El Al Boeing 747 flying from Schiphol to Tel Aviv. Empty, only 4 people in the plane, but it crashed inside one of the buildings. On a Sunday evening when everybody was watching football on TV, 7:30. People were sitting quietly in front of the TV set, and suddenly they hear a roar, and the biggest thing they have ever seen on Earth, a Boeing 747 flies into one of the buildings. And that was really a disaster. It was in every newspaper, and after that, basically, they made a decision to destroy most of this Bijlmermeer. So today, from the 33 flats we had, I think 80% is destroyed, and they have built ordinary houses there. Only a small part is still there. They call it the Bijlmer Museum. And I wrote a book about this Bijlmer. I wrote a book about all these things, but I thought this is such a big disappointment because we really tried to save it. I decided to move. I decided to do something else. And this offered me also an opportunity because I had the opportunity to work on this gas factory. And now you should know that like everywhere in the world, in all these cities, we have these industrial areas. We have these industrial areas on the outskirts of the historic city because in the 19th century, we were bringing infrastructure to the city, we were bringing electricity to the city, we were bringing water to the city, we started to make the city livable. Gas was originally used to bring light to the city. Gas was not in the first place brought to the city for warmth or for energy, it was to bring light to the city. And that light bringing to the city was one of the most important things that ever happened to the city, because before there were those functions in the city was not a nice place to live. Humanity lived on the land. But after the services, after that the cities were made livable with light and electricity and sewage systems, the city started to grow. And I will come back to that later. But today, half of the world population lives in cities. And in the next 25 years, another 25% of the world population will move from the land to cities. So the future of the world is a world of cities. And that started by bringing these services to the city. So one of these services was gas. And the interesting thing is also that these services, this whole idea to bring these services to the city was not from the local governments. Not in Ukraine, not in Russia, and also not in the Netherlands. It all came from one country, England, where a company that was not afraid to call itself Imperial Continental Gas Association, owned by Rothschild and Montefiore, two of the richest Jews ever in history, two of the most important ones also, both members of the House of Lords in England under Queen Victoria, where they decided to build gas factories all over Europe. In Antwerp, in Vienna, everywhere, gas factories to bring light to the city. It's an amazing story. And one of the places where they built one was in Amsterdam, and that was my project. And here we see a drawing of the gas factory. It looks quite nice with the canal and the train there, but it was a horror place, a place of horror. Because on a gas factory you heat gas and you take out the gas to put it in a pipe to bring it to the city, but before you do that you have to clean the gas. Because the gas is polluted, and there are pucks in the gas, and there is cyanide in the gas, and all that pollution has to be taken out by human beings. And the human beings that worked on the gas factory, they never made it longer than 5 years or 10 years. So they died. So that was not a very nice job, so to say. Gas factories were nice for the light, but not for the working conditions. So in 1960, when natural gas was found in the Netherlands, the factory was closed and was reused as a facility to put cables and lampposts. And between 1960 and 1990, the factory had basically been empty and had been used as a working facility. Already in 1960, the most beautiful buildings that could not be reused for industrial were demolished. And in 1990, the situation was that the city basically said, most people said, okay, we destroyed the whole thing. We are looking for new housing in Amsterdam, so this is going to be an area for new housing. But they found out that the soil under the buildings was heavily polluted. I cannot understand today how they couldn't know that, because they filled up the whole land with this pollution that they took out of the gas. But the soil was so heavily polluted that the project was in the top 3 of most polluted areas in the Netherlands. So yeah, that was something. So they calculated that we needed 500 million euros to clean that. That was something, 500 million euros. But on the other hand, that was very nice, because when I started the project, no one believed in the project. Really no one. They said, this is so expensive. On top of that, those beautiful buildings were by some idiot put on the monument list. How can you put those industrial buildings on a monument list? What can we do with those buildings? There are no walls in it, there is nothing in it. These are empty buildings. What can you do with them? Give us a park. That was the third thing. So the city needed a park, they needed a solution for the buildings, and I had to get rid of that pollution. And on top of that, no money. There was no money. There were only fences. And I tell this so clearly because this is absolutely what we see everywhere. I mean, I have, at this moment, I have made a proposal for a project in Yaroslavl in Russia. And the area that we are going to work on is exactly the same. You know, a little bit like 12 hectares, buildings on it where people say, yeah, what can we do with the buildings? It's polluted, there are fences, it's always the same issue. I have been a member of the jury for the Zeal factory also in Moscow, was the same thing, and they decided to destroy the buildings. And everywhere in the world, they still decide to destroy the buildings, to clean away the land, and to build houses. I'm going to show you what else you can do. So, because we didn't have the money, and because we didn't have anything else, we needed time. They very often say time is money, but that's completely wrong. That's not true. No time is money, and no money is a lot of time. People with no money always have a lot of time because they have nothing to do, and people with a lot of money never have time, because they have all these things to do that they think are important. So no money is time, and no time is money. And here, the same, we have a project, we have no money, so I said to my people, we need time. Because I need time to make a plan, a real plan. And by coincidence, I have to tell you that, by coincidence, we did the most important thing that ever happened. We started to experiment. So the experiment was not a deliberate choice made behind my desk. I simply had no other choice. Those buildings were empty. If we were not going to reuse them immediately, they would collapse, fall down, and we needed money to maintain them. So I convinced the people from the Environment Agency that the air and the soil on site was clean enough to have activities there, so we started events. I hired a person to manage that, to organize those events. The person was hired for 1 year, and it became 7 years. Because we needed 7 years to make those plans, to convince everybody that what we were planning to do was important. So here you see some of these events, and the most striking thing about it was that we didn't really think that this was going to be successful. But it was enormously successful. Everybody with a plan, with an idea, all these cultural institutions in Amsterdam came to me and said, hey, this is what we were waiting for. So not only small artists with a small workshop to make a painting or to make something small came to us, but movie makers like Peter Greenaway, he used the buildings to put all his stuff for his movies. We had Cirque du Soleil, we have the Holland Festival, we have theater groups, we had Karl-Heinz Stockhausen doing his helicopter strike quartet. That was something he planned in Salzburg during the festival, but Salzburg thought that the helicopters were going to make too much noise. We said, hey, we want to have those helicopters. So we had 4 helicopters with the violins in it. They flew over the factory site. They made noise. I cannot call that music. The noise was in a room like this, people listening to it. It was put on a CD, and 1 year later I'm in New York in a record shop In that time, we still bought records and CDs, and there was a heap of CDs like this. Caroline Stockhausen, Helicopter Strike Quartet, Westergasfabriek, Amsterdam. So what do these cultural events do? They put you on the map. And later, when we were making plans and when we needed our friends everywhere in the world and everywhere in the government to convince them that what we were doing was right and that we were going to put this inside a definitive plan, and they had to agree with us and they had to give us money, they all did that because they liked what happened there. Very often they had been there, they had read in the newspaper. So if there is one thing you take away from this lecture, and I'm not finished yet, not really, but if there is one thing you take away from the lecture, don't even think that experiment is bad. It's the most important thing you can do. The phase between the question is asked and the moment that you make your definitive plan is the most important period in time. This is where you can learn, this is where you can experiment, this is where you can make mistakes, not too big mistakes. Let's say people should not die. That is a too big mistake. And sometimes this happens. We had a lot of techno parties there. There were a lot of drugs. And yes, sometimes people take too many drugs and then you are really in trouble because you have nothing to do with it, but a mother loses a child. And then you're in the news, and that's not nice. So that is not, those risky activities are not really, but you learn and you learn and you learn. So then we made plans, we hired landscape architects, and basically what is important that all the information we learned during this experimental phase were put into the definitive plan. And this is why the park today is so successful. Because we knew what we were doing. We knew how program and physical structure and how the things worked, how people could come from the city to the area, simply how it worked, how you could program it, how you could make it successful. We knew, for instance, that to reuse the buildings, we did not need all these kind of walls and new structures inside the buildings that they always like to do. We knew that the most profitable way to reuse those big empty spaces was to keep them big and empty. Because creativity by artists and by this kind of people is triggered by this emptiness. And as soon as you start to put all these structures in it, you destroy it. So this is a very important lesson we learned. So we put all these elements in this project. We organized a big international competition. We had a winner for the competition, Catherine Gustafson from France. Then she went to the UK and then to America. It took me 4 years to make that plan for the park. This is the definitive design. And then we started to build it. And then the shit hit the fence because the whole thing was far more complicated, polluted than we ever thought. There was asbestos, there was cyanide everywhere. So we had to close the whole thing down and it was a mess. But because the plan was good and because people knew that what we were doing was right, we could proceed. They gave us extra money, the government gave us extra money, and finally, between this, hey, what are you doing? Between this and the end result, 4 years later, there is no difference. Through all the problems we had, we were able to build this. And today it looks like this, and everybody in Amsterdam is happy with that park. We have so many visitors that the park is it's overused. There's too many people there. So that is a problem, and this is one of the most beautiful pictures you see. I was discussing with some of the students in the workshop. The landscape architect in this park, she is a she, and she chose to trigger all senses. So she said, a park should not be one-dimensional, a park should be multi-dimensional. So the materials that you walk on, the knispering of the sand is important. The blowing of the wind is important. The colors you see are important. Everything in that park has to trigger your senses. The silence, the noise, the smell, everything. So it's a much more multi-dimensional park. It feels good, it smells good, it's a very interesting place to go. So you can have big events there, but you can also have silent places where you can sit alone and kiss your boyfriend or be happy. That was Westergasfabriek. And then the mayor was so happy with what I did that he met the mayor of Casablanca, and the mayor of Casablanca said to him, I have an empty building here, it's an abattoir, and I don't know what to do with it. I made some plans, and Christian de Potsdam Park, you know, you need a Frenchman with a complicated name. He made a plan, and it's 25 million euros, and I don't have the money. Do you know someone who can help me? And the mayor of Amsterdam said, of course, I have this guy who won all the prizes that you can imagine with this Westergasfabriek project, and I'm so proud of him. I will send my friend Verhagen to Morocco. So this is where I went, Casablanca. And Casablanca, yeah, that really sounds nice. We all would like to go to Casablanca. Now I can tell you one thing, don't go to Casablanca. There's nothing there. It's not the best place on earth, really not. Fez maybe, Marrakesh, but Casablanca, they have earthquakes. So here you have the abattoir. Abattoir is very important in Islamic culture, because to kill the animal in the right way is incredibly important. That has to be done in the right way. And the funny thing is also that Casablanca, and it's also a sad story, but this is the medieval part of Casablanca, was for 25% Jewish. Even in the 1960s, still 25% of the people living in Casablanca were Jewish, and they were the musicians and the artists, and they were a very important group of people in that city. But in 1960, the same thing happened in Romania and in a lot of other countries. I don't know about Ukraine, but in the 1960s, the government of Morocco made a deal with the government of Israel, and for every Jew that would go from Morocco to Israel, they paid them 6 euros. It's really true. So the government of Morocco was given money to try to get as many Jews as possible to Israel. So the 25% of that area is empty. There are maybe 2 or 3 Jews left in Casablanca. But when I arrived in the abattoir, that was so funny. They have chicken they kill, they have cows they kill, they even had pigs they kill, because even though it's Islamic, there was a lot of French people living in Casablanca and they need their pigs. So there was also pigs that were killed and all kind of different animals, donkeys even, but also chicken. And 3 days per week they killed the chicken in the Jewish way, and 4 days per week they killed the chicken in the Moroccan, in the Islamic way. Fantastic. So this was the abattoir. The abattoir was empty, there had been an earthquake, and there it was. To make a long story short, I said to the mayor, you don't need 26 million euros. It's crap. It's the complete wrong direction you are following. The only thing you need is a person to program the buildings. It's not going to be me, because I cannot do that. I'm not from your culture. You need someone who knows the area, who knows the people, who has the network, but you are going to program the buildings. You are going to start to take one space, and you are going to program that space, and when you know what to do with that space, you can renovate it, and then it's 12 hectares, so you have space enough and you can grow. That is the strategy I propose. And before we do that, we put it on the map, so we organize a festival. So we organized the festival, Easter 2005, I think. The mayor of Amsterdam came, the mayor of Paris came, the press came, everybody came, and they met there, and it was a big event with art and everything, and dancing and the whole thing, and nothing happened. Because the mayor in Casablanca, he's not the boss. They think they are important, But every meeting you have with the mayor, there's a guy sitting next to the mayor. He says nothing. And I say, who's the guy sitting next to you? During dinner, you know, we eat together sometimes. He says, oh, the guy sitting next to me is the representative of the king. And when the king doesn't like it, it doesn't happen. And when the king likes it, it's okay. And this is what he's there for. So obviously, the king didn't like it, and it didn't happen. So that is a reality you have everywhere, but you can always try. So that was Casablanca. The empties, if you ever come to Casablanca, ask for the abattoir at the taxi driver, and you will see it as I saw it 10 years ago. It's still there. There hasn't been an earthquake in this period, so it's still there, but it's still not used. It's empty. Then I thought, okay, another thing in Amsterdam, and I have done a lot of projects, but I will only mention this one and maybe one other one. And this is because you may think of everything I say that culture is the most important thing in regeneration and in cities and in projects. It's not true. There are many more things you can do. Sport is as important. Sport connects people, sport brings people together. Sport can be a very important activity. Education is even more important. I will come back to that. So later I had a chance to redevelop an area in Amsterdam to redevelop all these sport areas. And the problem is with the sport, I don't know how this is in your country, but in my country, out of these ideas of the functionalism time, because all the city planners in the Netherlands, they all went to Delft, and they all learned from these Van Eesteren adapts that they have to separate everything, put fences between them, and separate your whole life. So you have roads, you have sport fields, you have schools, you have a place for everything. Nothing, the old city is integrated, everything is together, but in the modern city planning, everything is separated. Things get better now, but I'm exaggerating. So with sport, all the sport areas were pushed out of the city. Because sport in the city, that's useless. So children who want to play hockey have first to bike 12 kilometers to get to the hockey field. Now that's beautiful. Then they have to bike through the woods, and some of the children get in trouble, and then the parents have to bring the children to the hockey field with the car. And then it becomes very complicated because only rich people have their children playing hockey, and they have big cars, as you know, and then the big cars hit each other, and then they say, oh, we need more space for the hockey. And the space they need for the hockey is not the space for the hockey, it's the space for the parking. Yeah? And they start to destroy the whole area around it, the beautiful houses, because they need more parking. So that, and I said, hey guys, let's bring the hockey to the children instead of the children to the hockey. How simple can it be? Because if we bring the hockey to the children, they only have to walk 50 meters to play hockey. Yeah, but we cannot bring hockey to the Bijlmermeer, to those areas where these migrants live. We cannot bring hockey there. They're not interested in hockey. They said, okay, bring another sport. What is the most interesting sport for migrants? So, in fact, indeed, in Bijlmermeer, we made athletics, and we did cricket, and you can do all kinds of things. So my point here was bring sport back in the community. Okay, this is one of my friends, Pablo. Pablo lives in Bilbao. So I remember exactly because I have one daughter, and my wife was pregnant of Marie. And so it was in the 3rd or 4th month, and we have the possibility to have a small holiday, and we went to Bilbao. I met Pablo in Canada, and he told me, Evert, you should see what we are doing, because the Guggenheim is almost finished, but you should see what we are doing. So that was the first time I came to Bilbao. It was around 1987. And I met him, and he told me everything about what they were doing, and it was amazing. I was flabbergasted, because, you know, we were already then thinking that the only thing that Bilbao did was a Guggenheim museum. And I have to tell you truly, I thought it was stupid. How can you regenerate a city with a museum? Come on, you don't have art to put in the museum. It's a useless activity. I didn't believe in it. So we arrive in Bilbao with the car, we park the car, we go to Pablo, he lives directly almost opposite the museum. His father had an apartment there. He went there, and then we talked, and he showed me everything. And here Pablo's sitting on the head of the table next to the mayor. And he told me, the mayor of Bilbao, he saw that his city was completely at the verge of collapsing. Imagine Kharkiv with a river in the middle. Imagine that. You know, the river was overflowing every year. So in every street in the old city, you had half a meter of water every year. Not snow, but water. So that means everything gone. You have steel factories closing, you have railway lines no longer functioning, you have a harbor moving, and you are the capital of the ETA, which is a movement that wants to make Basque Country separate, and they kill each other. And they don't only kill each other, but they like to kill politicians. Because if you're a politician, you are a target. So every member of the city council of Bilbao has 4 bodyguards every day walking in the street. That was the only thing that made the streets crowded, the bodyguards. Even at the opening day of the Guggenheim, they found bomb cars parked there that they wanted to explode because they didn't like the whole idea of the Guggenheim or any improvement of the conditions. So the mayor of Bilbao was in real trouble, and he put everybody together. He had an idea. He was a heart doctor, so he was not a politician. He was, during the day, 3 days per week, operating people with heart diseases. And in the other 4 days, he was the mayor, and Pablo was his assistant, and they started to do the project. And he said, we are going to bring all the people that are important on the table. That's the director of the railway company. That is the guy from the Ministry of Infrastructure. That's the guy from the port. That's 20 people. And we tell those people that we are going to make plans, and we are going to do this unanimously. You know the word? Unanimously, that means that if one of them says no, it doesn't happen. So it's not by majority, it's by unanimous vote. Which was very nice, Pablo told me, because no one dared to say no. They were all afraid to say no, because if they were the only one, they would stop the whole project, so they always tried to find a solution. And the solution was not only to put a Guggenheim there, but to remove the port, to control the river, to build a beautiful, the most beautiful metro line in the world. Everybody living in Bilbao was against the metro line, but it was made by Norman Foster, and today the entrances for the metro are called Fosteritos, which is like naming your cat after your favorite architect, you know, Fosterito. That is really love. And so now they swim in the river, yeah? And here on this empty piece of land, which is former harbor, they put the Guggenheim. And Pablo explained to me the Guggenheim is only the PR campaign. The Guggenheim is the PR. If we had done a PR campaign for Bilbao to put it on a map, to make it attractive for people again to come, after everything we had done, we would have spent much more money with less results. Now we pay for this Guggenheim and everything is taken care of by itself because the whole world knows we exist. A lot of people come here to see it and they find out that the city is quite nice. You can eat good food there. It's Spain, it's nice, it's beautiful, and that is the PR strategy. Now, Eindhoven, I'm not going to talk too much about Eindhoven because my friends, the other tutors, two there, they come from Eindhoven, they know much more about Eindhoven, but Eindhoven is a very important example. I told you I was born there, near Eindhoven. Here, under this clock was my school. I sat in the class and that was the clock that gave me the time. At a certain moment, 15 years ago or something, Philips, which was the biggest company in Eindhoven, together with DAF cars, trucks, you know them, and Philips, you know of the lamps, they closed. So Eindhoven is a city like a Russian city, and a Ukrainian city, by the way. A friend of mine in Russia, he told me, Evert, you have to understand Russia has no cities like Europe. We only have factories with houses around it. That's our city. 99% of our cities are factories with houses around it. Eindhoven is a city like that. They had Philips and Dove in the middle, and around it, housing. And when you lose your heart, it's really difficult to make it work again. And this was what was happening in Eindhoven. And today, Eindhoven is one of the most successful cities in the Netherlands. They have taken their chances. And we were talking about Emmen. You remember Emmen? Because there is a zoo in Emmen. Now, if there is a list of the 40 most important cities in the Netherlands, and Emmen has always been on the last place. And the zoo doesn't change that. So you can do things good, and you can do things bad. And what I'm interested in is how did it come that Bilbao was successful, that Westergasfabriek was successful, that Eindhoven was successful, and that all these other cities who are thinking that they are doing the good thing are not successful. That's what I'm interested in. Okay, we skip this. This is the last project. I cannot say nothing about this project because I was a member of the team to build this park in Moscow, the heart of the biggest city in Europe. Whatever we think of it, it's the largest city in Europe, Moscow. And they have made a new park directly next to the Kremlin and the Red Square. And I had the opportunity to be in the advisory team, and we discussed how to bring the park to the river, how to organize the different levels. There was a competition, Dealerske Video 1. And the amazing thing is that 2 years ago, we won the competition, and now the park is finished. September last year, I was there a week after the opening. They didn't invite me for the opening because it was an opening with Putin, and when Putin is there, they don't invite people from abroad. They don't like that. I don't know why. And I was there, a member of the team. So this is Ariadne. I also worked in Petersburg on the street art museum. That's the kind of things I do. Okay, we have a world of cities. So I really started to think, what is it we have in common, and what is so important about that? And I made this map. I could not find a map on the web with all the cities larger than 100,000 inhabitants on it. So I made it myself. It was a good exercise. And one of the first things I learned was this. Half of the world's population lives here, in this circle. 50% of all the human beings on the world live in that area in a circle, 5,000 kilometers from Hong Kong, in the middle. There is only one Russian city in this circle, Vladivostok, and there is Japan, Korea, the whole China, India, Indonesia. That's a lot of people. So don't be surprised. In the next 25 years, you will be part of that. I hope I can be part of it, but that everything happens there. You know, the weight of what's happening in the world is going to that. And we can talk about Africa as much as we like. You see it's huge, very big, but there are only a few cities here in this corner and here. South America, only here. Australia, only here. America on the east coast, on the west coast, and that's it. Here is where it happens. So, a world of cities. And all these people, all the people today, are moving to cities. And this is a very important thing for the world. Because I think the nation state is a thing of the past. Okay, we have to live with it. We put Ukrainian flags everywhere. And we put American flags in American cities, and we put German flags in German cities, and we all do as if that is our future, but it's not really. Because for most people, the city is the place where they want to be and where they connect to, and that gives them their identity. So if you ask a person where do you come from, he will usually say, especially when his city is a nice city, people from the Netherlands, someone from the Netherlands who lives in Amsterdam will always say Amsterdam, never Netherlands. Watch out. So city becomes the first thing to be proud of, to be part of. So I think we have a world of cities. And people move to the cities. That's a very important thing. And now I'm going to say a little bit more about the cities. I already told you what the reason for this is. Because it started, of course, with the possibility to live in those cities. When we brought infrastructure to cities, when we made them cleaner, when there was electric light, etc., it became possible not only for poor people or for labor workers, like in Manchester and Liverpool and all these industrial cities to live in the city, but also rich people wanted to live in the city because they were near to the services and near to everything they had, and they could live there in a safe way. And then, if you look at that migration, and that enormous migration that's going to happen in the near future, the migration from the land to the city is far more important than the migration between countries. But the most important migration, I think, is the migration between cities. Because logically speaking, when you have 25% of the world population extra to take care of, every city could grow. But that's not the reality. Some cities grow exponentially, and other cities stay far behind. And the cities that stay far behind are, most of the time, the former industrialized cities where there is no reason anymore to go to, where there is nothing to connect to. So instead of only talking about projects, we have to put that project in the context of the city, because that project can only be successful if it gives a reason to make that city more attractive and to make more people stay. Because this is not a prediction, this graph, this is the reality. This is a real measurement of migration. And what does this graph say? This is the age, and this is the percentage. Now this is the graph for the Netherlands. You cannot find a graph like this for Italy. Because in Italy, you need 3 months, and you have to go twice or 3 times to the city hall to change the place where you live. So 300,000 Italians every year, 300,000 young Italians every year move out of Italy to Germany, to Switzerland, to the Netherlands, to another country, and in their files it says that they still live in Italy. That's funny. But in most countries where they have a working measurement system, like in the Netherlands, and I found the graphs for the USA and for Britain and for many more other countries, it's all the same. A little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but this is the graph. And what does it say? And it's quite logical when I explain it to you. Between the ages of 10 and 20, people start to move. And the reason, of course, is obvious. Young people move to the city where they can have their second-grade education. That's the most important movement. And here they move again because they have finished their education and they make a decision on where to go. And here, when they are 40 or somewhere around that, between 35 and 45, they stop to move. Not really, because they have a car and they have money and they can go in the plane, but they become tourists. That's the other illness of the world. But when they migrate, they do that when they are younger than 40. It's a very important thing to remember. And when they are older than 40, they stay where they are. So, obvious conclusion, city planners, city mayors, city managers, if you make a plan, if you invest a euro or a Ukrainian money, it doesn't matter what, if you are investing in a plan, think about who you want to have there. Because if you think your plan is important for them, these are the ones with the money, they don't move. They really don't move. When they move, and this is information from the United Nations migration papers, it's not something I make up. When these people move, it's most of the time negative reasons. They lose their job, the partner dies, there is a divorce, something's happening. You have to move. Here, it goes up when you get older, and you know where you move then. But here, this movement is important. Catch the fish where they are swimming. So in my words, every project to make your city more attractive and more successful should be focused on these people. And it almost never is. So that's completely wrong. Because city planners and big companies, they prefer to invest in motorways, in airports. Berlin, 30 billion in an airport. And the CEO of Lufthansa said last weekend, we have to destroy that whole airport that we have built. It has never been used, not a day, because it's no longer working. It's all derelict, old stuff. We should start all over again to make a good airport. Can you imagine? They all really believe that Berlin needs an airport. Has any of you been to Berlin in the last 10 years? It's the most vibrant city in Europe at this moment. Every young person in Europe every Italian, every young work without a job kid from Greece or wherever would love to be in Berlin, to stay there and to have so why on earth do they have to spend 30 billion on an airport? If they invested that money in those young, talented people and in the possibilities to grow their possibilities, to grow the market, like Eindhoven did, they would be booming. But instead of that, they choose to build an airport because then you can fly to all the places in the world, in China, in Hong Kong, in America. It's a choice. So this is the most important graph I have to show you. Catch the people when they are young between, I keep on pushing the wrong button, sorry. Okay, so the migration from the land to the city is very important. And why is that also so important? I think we all have to understand that in a country like India, or in a country like Brazil, or in South Africa, in those countries, you very often tend to think that the favela, or the barrio, or the shanty town is the worst place on earth. You know, I visited Rio de Janeiro a few times. I went with people to the favela. It is quite dangerous, and it's that's really not a place to go alone. But they tell me the same story over and over again. Those people have made a choice. They were not sent away where they were. If, to say it shortly, the situation was better where they come from, they would go back. So we all have to understand that their living conditions in that city, their hope for a better future, their hope for a better future for their children, the possibility to have access to education is much higher in that city. And this is even more important for girls. Because in a country like India, when you are a girl and you live on the land, and also in Brazil and in South Africa, if you are a girl and you live on the land, you simply don't exist. You're not even in the books. You're not that important. But in the city, there is the possibility to become someone, a person. So emancipation and education are the driving forces for many people to go to cities. And that is a very important thing. And if these cities are machines that function well, if these arrival cities have the capacity to take these people in, to give them papers, to give them the possibility to put a little bit of money on the bank and to start something, it will take time. It will take another 20 years, but as soon as the daughter finishes her education, things have changed. Because the daughter is not going to make 7 children when she has an education, she only makes 1 or 2. She's clever. And that changes everything. So I think that this movement from the land to the city is the most important thing we are going to see in the next 25 years. And you as architects and city planners and people interested in cities are part of that. And that we have to facilitate that process. You cannot stop it. There is no way you can stop that. And that we have to facilitate that process and understand it. And when we understand it, we understand that education and emancipation are the driving forces for that. And that if we want to make our cities successful, if we want to stop that migration from one city to another, there's only one thing we can do. Not build walls, like Trump and others propose, because to stop people with walls or to put an army on the Mediterranean Sea is a useless thing. When people want, they want to risk everything for that, you know? So the only thing we can do is start with our city, our own city, and build those emancipation possibilities. And emancipation starts by education, and then of course, it also is very important, and this with an academy like this, you know, so a place like this, to start an academy like this, in a city like this, is basically, in my words, the most important thing that you can do. Is in Eindhoven, it happened with a design academy. Here, you have an architecture academy. It's next to the existing education institutions. You make something that is new, that brings a new activity to the place. But it's not enough to educate people. The more important thing also for the mayor and for the politicians is to make those people stay. I gave this lecture at the Economic High School in St. Petersburg. That's a very successful economic high school. It's founded by one of those oligarchs, one of those exceptions of oligarchs in Russia that has a brain. The guy really has a brain. He's clever. He puts his money in an old factory and he makes an economic high school there. There are 100 students in the economic high school listening to me. 80% girls. Boys don't seem to want to go to the economic high school for one reason or another. I ask them, who of you has a plan B? Almost all raise their hands. So what does it mean? Evert, they say to me, after the lecture, we are drinking coffee. Do you think I can go back to where I came from? I would love to. My parents live there, I live my life there, I have my friends there, I have my family there, but there is no possibility for me because when I go back, how can I find a job? Where can I start? What can I do? So the point is, we should offer the opportunities, the ones who are responsible for that. If we want to make something out of our cities and make people stay, we should offer those opportunities. And when we don't offer those opportunities, and this is also a very important thing I'm saying, we don't vote in the elections. It's a mistake. Democracy is overrated. We vote with our feet. The most talented people leave first. And the least talented people stay behind. And if you look at the map in America, all the talented young people have gone to the West Coast or to the East Coast, and they live in the cities, and they are part of this new thing. Not all rich, that's a mistake. All the people in England that are young and talented and want to be part of the new world, they live in London. There's no other way. All the people in France, they live in Paris. All the people in Germany, that's a nice exception, because Germany is polycentric. They don't all go to Berlin. Some go to Munich, some go to Hamburg. So that is better. That's already better. And they take the opportunities. And the result of that is that in the middle, in the US, and in the south in Italy, and in the mountains in Austria, the parents sit, and the ones that didn't make it sit, and they say, hey, guys, you have everything, and we are left behind there. Our shops are gone, our cultural institutions are gone, everything is closing. And then when they can vote, they say, bang, we are still here. Now you have to listen to us. And that is what's happening at this moment in the world, I think. It's frustration about this whole thing, that some people can make it and other people can't. And we can change that with good projects, like Westergasfabriek, like the abattoir in Casablanca, like this here, all these projects in Kharkiv. So here, when I talk in Moscow, it's absolutely clear. You know the numbers better than I do. 20 million people living in Moscow. Then we have some cities, like 10 cities with 1 million people. That makes maybe 20 million, 30, 40 million people in Russia living in cities. Okay, when you say a city is a place with more than 5,000 inhabitants, Russia is completely urbanized. But for me, a city without a university is not a city. So if we look at cities with a university that have a capacity to make people stay, that's only there for 30% of, well, some 30 million people. Then we still have 110 left. 110 million people living in this gigantic land with no services and no possibilities. I'm not surprised that they vote for Putin. Really not, because that's the only hope they have. And that's the problem. And then and in Moscow, the problem is that it's enormously growing. That the attraction of Moscow is so big that everything is happening there. It's like a magnet. It's like energy, energy, energy. And the only thing to change that is, in my vision, put energy in all those other cities. So my proposal during my lectures was to these guys, if you want to know what to do, go to your higher education, ask the students to make a list of 5 points. What would make you stay? What can I do for you as your mayor to make you stay? Every talented young student in your city, ask that question. And when you have those answers, put them together, make a list, and work on the 5 most important answers you have heard. And in 10 years, you will see more young, talented people are going to stay, and you will have a result. And if you don't do it, if you stick to your old ideas, nothing is going to change, nothing is going to happen. And really, that is not only a problem in Russia, that's a problem everywhere. I told you about Italy. Italy is completely running empty with young, talented people. I'm so happy to have the possibility to have a holiday with my wife. We have decided to go to South Italy again. I love it there. I have friends there, but it's a completely empty place. The sun is shining, the Mediterranean is there, the food is good. All young, talented people have gone. They are simply no longer there, moved out to Milan or anywhere else. It's unbelievable. So what is even, then some people say the answer is the creative city. You've heard about the creative city. And you've heard that my lecture is creativity in the city. Now, I think the creative city is bullshit. Because a city can never be creative. We are creative. People can be creative. That's, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, you can laugh. It's crap. It's an empty. Look at this. For thousands of years, we had agriculture. Thousands of years, people lived from agriculture. Not only agriculture, but we had mining and fishing. And what is the most important thing of those economic activities? You can only fish where the fish is, you can only mine where the mine is, and you can only grow crop where the land is. So it's completely connected to place. Yeah? Then we get industrial economy. That is in the 17th century. So think about this. In the year 1000, that's only 1,000 years ago, the year 1000, that's not so long ago. If we put 10 people together, that is 20 people together, that's those ages added up, that's 1,000 years ago. That's in humanity, that's nothing. So 1,000 years ago, there were only 4 big cities in Europe. 4. Constantinople, Palermo, Sevilla, and Cordoba. 3 of those cities were under Islamic rule. Only Constantinople, which became, of course, that was the Christian city. That was where all our hope was in Constantinople. Now, 1,000 years later, a lot of things have happened, and we have an enormous amount of bigger cities. So, the industrial economy changed everything. But one of the most important things that happened during industrialization is not only the industry itself, but it's also the mechanization of the fishing and the mining and the agriculture. So there is the economy itself, but there is also the result in the old economy. Yeah? I remember that on the farm of my father. Then we get the computer economy. I remember being at the university and that the first computer was brought in. Before that, they didn't exist. So we did our calculations on paper I don't know how we did it, but I don't remember. But the first computer was brought in. That was something. So that's my life, you know, that's when I was young, 20, like you now. That was the first computer, it's unbelievable. And since then, we have the information services. But the result is not only the information services, but the result is that the manufacturing and the agriculture have been computerized. And today we see an enormous growth of creative services, of branding, and that is the new economy. That is an enormous chunk of our economy, and I try to explain it as fast as possible, of course, with the iPhone, because the iPhone is a very important gadget, is a very important thing to have, every mobile phone, but half of the price, or even 70% of what you pay for that phone, is branding. Only 30% is the phone. So 70% you pay to belong to the group. Now, maybe you want to buy a car, and you have a choice, a Skoda or an Audi. You buy an Audi. The car is exactly the same. They do the same thing. No, we want to have an Audi, because Merkel has an Audi, I need an Audi. A Mercedes, all of Moscow is full with German cars. And not because they are better than, of course they are better than Russian cars, that's not the point, but I mean, it's unbelievable. So they pay to be part of that group. And when you go to the hairdresser, when you buy your clothes, when you buy new spectacles, everything you buy is for a large part you pay for that branding part, for that creative part. Those people are extremely creative. But the most important thing in my story is not the creativity there, it's the fact that they no longer have to be working in the place where the thing is made. They can live everywhere. Amazon, Google, Apple, all these companies, their large headquarters, they are everywhere. And they are not everywhere. Where are they? They are in the attractive city. They are where the talent is. Because every big company in the world, and smaller companies as well, even this academy, they know one thing: without talented young people, I'm nowhere. Yeah? All these companies know that. And I think the city should think about their population as a company. Because how can you, as a city, let your young, talented people go to another place if you not have the capacity to connect to them, to make them stay? That economy will never come to you, that economy will never grow, and you are on the slide to nowhere. And it's, sustainably speaking, a very bad thing. Yeah, because, you know, Detroit and a lot of American cities, they lost their economic basis and they're empty. All these buildings are empty. I'm not saying that every city in Siberia should stay. I think you need to make a good understanding if it's possible or not. Because I agree with a lot of people that infrastructure is important. We have really to do a serious analysis if it's possible or not. But if you do nothing, if in Bilbao they had chosen to do nothing, it would have been one of those ghost towns. And in France and in Italy, you have a lot of them. Eh? Those smaller ghost towns that have beautiful monuments but where no one lives, there's absolutely plenty of them. So this creative economy is not so important because of this artists and all this thing. It's about the fact that you can do it wherever you like, and that you need another infrastructure and other facilities for those people working in that kind of economy. And that is the last thing that I'm going to talk about. So here we have The Economist. This is already an old issue. It's 2005, and it says the search for talent, why it's getting harder to find. The whole article is about one thing. Every company in the world knows that you have to look at the university at the most talented people and to find them when they are swimming, you know, like I was showing in my graph. And companies know that, and cities should know that as well. So this talent is not coming by itself. Of course, you can be talented without having a higher degree in education. But if we also have a short look at education, there's one other number that enormously strikes me. I was in Lviv last weekend. Lviv, or whatever you say. You know where it is in the west. And I talked to the deputy mayor, and he told me we have 170,000 students. And I think Kharkiv has 300,000 students? More? 340,000? Something like that. 180. Oh, that's a different number, because they said, anyhow, Kharkiv has 170,000 students. And I say, oh, that's a good number to begin with. He said, oh, no, you don't mean that. No, he said, they're not the most talented people because the education, you know, here in the Ukraine is not so good, and it's a little bit old-fashioned and blah, 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 blah. I say, yeah, but when you look at the UNESCO list of education, Ukraine is in the higher part of the list, you know, it's not on the bottom. There is not, they can read, they can write, they can calculate. You know the percentage of people in the world that have an academic degree? What's the percentage of people in the world with an academic degree? How many people in the world have an academic degree? 3%? 3%, I suppose. 3%? 3? Yeah, very near, 2. 2% of the world population has an academic degree, 98% not. So we can say people younger than 20, by definition, cannot have an academic degree. And since that is half of the world population, we can say that who can have an academic degree, 4% has it. So then we make it a little bit higher. But that's it. So to have an academic degree is really something to be proud of. Don't fool yourself. That's really something to be proud of. And when you look at the top universities, and by the way, university, the whole concept of university was invented in England in the industrial age. Yeah? Every school in the world, every successful school in the world follows the English rules. That kind of imperialism, you know, that's unbelievable. And if you look at those universities that are good, these are the 400 best universities in the world. These are the ones in the USA. These are the ones in Europe. These are the ones in Asia. This line here, the thick blue line, is the equator. So where most people in the world live, there are the least universities. There are only 2 big universities under the equator in Australia, and there is another one, I believe, in South America, and that's it. So that is a lot of work we have to do. So don't fool yourself. Here in Europe, with Moscow in it, and Amsterdam, and all that thing in it, there is the most educated population in the world. So we have an enormous good start in this whole affair. So to come to a conclusion, to make a city attractive, and in my opinion also to make your project attractive, everything you do, you should think about emancipation, market, and production. Because if a city doesn't have these three things, it's useless. So, how much time do I have? Oh, I can explain this one. Because most of the time when I do a lecture, I never have the possibility to explain this one, but I like this one. Because we think, many of us think, I don't know what we think when we think about attractivity, but what kind of places do have the capacity to attract? So, to explain it to you, to grab together what I've said. The world is a world of cities. We have like several thousand cities with more than 100,000 inhabitants, 4,000 of them. They are the nodes of energy. And then we have people migrating, us, because that, most of the part, is the population between 25 and 40. We are migrating. So we go through that energy field. And where do we go? To the place that is most attractive, that attracts us most. And what is that attractiveness? And what can make us stay? I want to elaborate a little bit about that. Because it's not only the job, it's not only the money, it's a lot of things, a lot of different things. And this is why I made this graph. Because I once read a very interesting column, short article, by a Dutch guy who had his ideas from all other people, but that doesn't matter. And he said basically there are three ways you can look at the world. You can look at the world from the land, you can look at the world from the barracks, the military barracks, the industrial barracks, and you can look at the world from the city. Three ways. Let's begin with the land. The way of the land is the stories, the myths, the forest, Wagner, the Bible, the Quran. Lots of people in the world live by the book, and the book is something magic. But the book is something magic because it's old, and there are all these things in it, and we believe in it. So the way to live for the land is very important for a lot of people, and some people choose to live only by that rule, the rule of the Bible, the rule of the land, the rule of the myth. It defines a lot of things we do in our lives. It connects us to place. It's a very important thing, to be connected to place. So that's the land. Now the barracks. The barracks is the industrial way of thinking. It's the management. It's the linear thinking. It's when you want to go from A to B, you take the shortest route. It's the whole city building of the Siam. It's basically a lot of things that we see around us today. That's all based on this industrial thinking, this logical thinking, logic. The barracks, the military, the organization model is top-down. You have to do what I say. That's also rules, because that's the law. There's also a book, but then you live by the law. It's different than the Bible, because the Bible comes from, I don't know where it comes from, but the law comes from logical thinking. And then the third thing is the city. That's more the creative way. That's like when you think, hey, you know, maybe there's another possibility. Maybe there's something else. Maybe we can find another way. And we need that creative thinking. We need that third world, because if that didn't exist, nothing new would ever happen. Everything in this world is made, everything we see around us is made by people. I've never seen two dolphins build a house. Yeah? They didn't do that. Animals, the difference between animals and human beings is that human beings meet to mate and to create, and all other species living in the world only meet to mate. You know what I mean? So that's, mating is not unimportant, I'm not saying that, but we do two things, and they do only one thing in the zoo. Huh? So for us, we want to meet, not only to find offspring, but also to create something. So this creativity is an enormous important driving force. Now, let me give you an example for this scheme. If you come home to your parents and you introduce your new boyfriend, they will basically look at three things. The first thing is, where does he come from? What's his religion? The land. The second thing is he functional? Everything functioning well, he's not ill, his legs are there, his arms are there, everything is complete, and it looks okay. But if these were the only important things, life would be extremely boring. So what makes it really interesting is when the guy plays piano, or plays soccer, or does something special. That makes it interesting. So, but if he only plays soccer and piano and he's not functional and he is from nowhere, it doesn't work at all. So my point is, you need all three. You need not only creativity, you need logic and you need land of where it comes from. So everything that is good has all these three elements in it. And things that do not feel pretty, they miss one aspect. That is my point. So if you want to create attractivity in this world where everybody is moving, if you want to make a place that is attractive, like Westergasfabriek or Eindhoven or Bilbao or the zoo, it should have these three things in it. And I stress land and this aspect. I had a conference in China a year ago, and the conference was about nostalgia. So funny. I was sitting in a room with professors, Chinese professors, older than 70, 80, talking about nostalgia. You know nostalgia, the word? Nostalgia is an invention from Switzerland. It's like 150 years ago or 200 years ago, during the war, soldiers had a kind of sickness, and they didn't want to go back to the war. And some guy started to call that a Greek word. He invented the word and he named it nostalgia. The treatment for nostalgia was to give them opium, to send them to the mountains for 2 weeks, and then things were better and they could back to the front. Yeah, that was nostalgia. So nostalgia is an invention. But the feeling is important, because with all this movement, with all this migration, we forget one thing, that our identity, and this is why identity is so important, is based on our language and is based on this part of who we are from the land. That is inside us. That's what we feel. You know, I am Russian, or I am Dutch, or I am Ukrainian, and that part. And that part becomes more important when you get older. When you get older, you lose all these memories of the last years, but the things that become more and more important are your first memories, where you come from, your roots. And that is a very important aspect in the world. So what I'm saying here is that this enormous migration and us going from one country to another, etc., is really not the best solution. I want to promote a thinking to make more progress, to put much more energy in giving people the possibility to stay where they are. Not to forbid them to move, but to give them the possibility to stay where they are. I think that is really important, and that is this scheme. Okay, the last thing is every economy needs a market. The agricultural economy had a market for the animals. The industrial economy had the market, which we call now today the market, the prices, and the market, the official world market, is highly computerized today. But the creative economy, this branding economy, also needs a market. And the funny thing is that that market is the coffee shop. It's the most important thing that starts, a very important thing that starts to attract people and to bring people together. Because if you have heard what I said, you know, people want to meet, not only to mate, but to create. In this new world, where that becomes so important, we meet each other in places where we feel safe. And very often, that is a coffee shop or a restaurant or a library or some facility, some public space in our environment. And so if we want to make our cities more attractive, we can not only look at the people who are attractive to make them stay, but the most important thing we can do to bring them together, because only creativity grows when you bring people together, is the market. So if there is a choice for the government to do anything, there are two major points: education and create the market. And then after that, the rules, and also the possibility to buy the stuff that is produced. But market is in every economy the most important thing. And it's so funny that I travel a lot, I really travel a lot, and that this change you see in every attractive city. All these cities where people say, hey, that's a nice city. Here is Ljubljana, for instance, in Croatia. No, Croatia, no. Yeah, Slovenia. Oh, I'm completely wrong. Slovenia, Ljubljana, very nice city, very nice city. And you know why? Because when you walk through the streets, there is this possibility for connection. There is these people everywhere. It's a university city. So we tend to like cities like Lviv, where we have an easy capacity to meet the other without being in danger. Like in the modernist city, when you are walking in the street there, in my first 15 years in Amsterdam, there were a lot of meetings, but those meetings were most of the time rapes or robberies. And then it's not a very positive thing. So it should be a meeting that is with a good intention. Okay, so to wrap it up, start with what's there. Value your experiment, liminal space and liminal time. So what happens in between is very important. Liminal space is what I explain, is when you walk through Ljubljana or Lviv or a nice city, the possibility to connect. This space belongs to you, that's clear. And this space belongs to me, but what's here in between, this is how near I dare to come to you, that's liminal space. It's basically your space and my space together. And that is a very important space. So when the semi-public space in a city is owned by no one, you have troubles to connect.
Can you give us an example of liminal space?
Yeah, liminal space is when you put a chair in front of your house. It's the space in between. You know, the house, your ownership ends here, and the communal ownership starts there. But at the moment you put a chair there, you give the other the possibility to connect. Yeah? And so as a human being, when you walk somewhere, you also create a liminal space around you because you can make exactly clear in the way you look and the way you dress and the way you, if you want to be connected or you want to be alone, and so you make your liminal space smaller and bigger. So liminal space and liminal time are very interesting aspects. Connections, of course, we also need, and this is the last theme, I think. What I've learned is that I've never seen any successful project that didn't have a good team. Garbage in, garbage out. Quality makes quality. So it's very important, if you work on something, to work also on the quality of your team. Take care that all these elements are in it, that the land and the logic and the creativity are in balance, and that there is a good way to work together, that you understand each other's words, because a team, to create something together, you can never create, it's almost impossible to be an individual artist like Van Gogh or Rembrandt in this time of the world and create something that is valuable for the rest of the world. It's almost impossible. Most of the time you have to work in a team, and then these ideas and these things become very important. I have never seen all the successful projects that I've been in. They invite me in their office, and it's absolutely clear the team is working in a nice way, in a positive way together, and there's always a mad guy, a crazy guy like me, or someone who is not really the leader, but brings everything together. So leadership and team are enormously important. And if you don't have that, try to arrange it or forget it. It's not going to work. Okay, that's what I have to say. And this one is for the students. This is the creative process. I don't know if you know this graph, but this is what always happens, where it begins. We are now in the whatever, and then the panic comes, and then all the work has to be done while crying, and this is the deadline. So, see you tomorrow.